What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome inside our halftime show for the Straight Up Saints podcast powered by 4D. The Saints are trailing to the Raiders at halftime, but I think overall, if you're just going from the positive outlook, I think the Saints have done some things today that you have to be excited about, particularly Spencer Rattler. I think that was probably his best half as a pro so far, 11 of 13, 146 yards, and a touchdown pass, which came on that trick play where Kubiak got pretty creative, had the toss to Kendre Miller, toss it right back to Rattler, then fired, a rope down the sideline to Foster Moreau. So, look, trailing, there's some, really bad things in this half. Time of possession's been an issue for the Saints. If you just go by total plays, the Raiders are really cleaning up business there. Raiders had a 97-yard touchdown drive. So, if we're going negatives, I think the biggest negative so far is we're seeing the defensive line isn't good enough and the front seven is just old, right? I think this is one of DeMario Davis's worst games in a long time. Outside of that goal line stand in the first drive of the game, I thought that was a really rough sequence for New Orleans. So defensively, not really impressed, right? The Raiders have had a lot of success, and I think what scares me the most is the Raiders are not a good rushing team, and yet they're going to rush for, 160, 170 today. At least that's the rate they're on. So defensively, thumbs down. But overall, offensively, I'm pretty, I'd say I'm pretty pleased with what I'm seeing from Spencer Rattler. I think he looks so poised right now. That final drive to get 3 points, that's a great thing for the Saints. You want to see what the rookie can do in that, 2-minute drill offense, which honestly was really like, was it 47, 50 seconds, whatever it was. So I thought he looked really efficient down the stretch, took a hard shot, delivered it down the field to Kevin Austin on one play, and that might have been his best throw of the game so far. So Rattler has looked good. Defense has looked poor. And the last thing before I get to the comments you guys have to say, and this is more so a frustrating thing, Kendre Miller gets hurt again. And, I think the talent is there with Kendre. I've said it a million times. I don't think the ability is the question. I think it's the availability. And once again, we're proving that the availability is going to be a question mark for him. And it's really frustrating if it is a concussion. Those are things you really can't avoid, right? Those are kind of freak things. But the downside to that is if it is a concussion, you're probably not having him next week, right? And now what was supposed to be a 5-game stretch for him to play well, especially with Alvin out for a little, that's not really his opportunity. Now it opens up the door for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and so far he's been okay. But that part is a little, frustrating for sure. So Kendre goes down. Rattlers look good. Defense, not so good so far. So that's definitely been a concern. Let's get to any comments you guys have here. Blair says this defense legitimately needs 15 new players. So pathetic. Yeah, I think this defense is in just a really rough spot. I think from a roster building perspective, the Saints are going to have such an interesting offseason because you're not going to have a lot of money to spend, but you have holes everywhere, right? I think you need help at linebacker. I think you need help at defensive end. I think you need help at defensive tackle. And honestly, for some of those positions, defensive tackle, you need 2 new ones. For defensive linemen, I think you need like 2 new edge rushers if you could get. Obviously, I'd try to get one in the draft, but I think for New Orleans, they have problems there. Cornerback, Alontae Taylor is not an outside corner. I don't know how many more times we have to say this and see it on display. He has really struggled. So I'm definitely not happy about that. Safety-wise, Saints need to get new safety. So they got a lot of issues to sort out in the offseason. Matthew says, if this season's taught me anything, it's that absolutely under no circumstances should Paulson and Debo not get re-signed. Alontae Taylor is generally awful. The cornerback room is a must upgrade this offseason. Yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest takeaways, right? Adebo goes down. And for as frustrating as Adebo can be, the one thing I always say about Adebo is, he's going to make big plays, right? So you take the good with the bad. Right now with Alontae, we're just getting all bad. And I don't know how you can really defend that, from a fan perspective. Forgive says his defensive line is simply isn't strong enough. The safeties and corners should not be involved with tackling the running backs. That also causes these explosive plays. Granderson, Chase, Saunders, and Shepard should all be gone next season. I mean, Granderson will be here. And I'm okay with keeping Granderson. I still think Granderson could be a good football player. I think the problem is the Saints need Granderson to be a great football player, and he is not anywhere close to a great football player. So for me, that's where the issue lies. But yeah, I mean, this defensive line is not good enough. Aiden O'Connell's been pretty calm there. Hasn't really been in a situation where you got to worry about, him taking hits. So it's been rough. Trey Gift says Rattler QB1 next year. If he finishes today the way he's played so far, or somewhere close, doesn't have to be as efficient. He's 11 of 13. I don't expect him to finish this game 22 of 26. That'd be really ridiculous. I think the way he's played, you better not start Derek Carr next week. And I'll talk about that in depth after this game's over, and we'll see how Rattler finishes it. But you want to see the rookie play. That you want to get a better evaluation. Today's been an awesome evaluation so far of what he can and can't do. Cliff says Run D has been sus all half, making Abdul look like Barkley. That pass over Ugo Amadi was damn embarrassing. Once again, offense is too inconsistent. I don't know if the offense is too inconsistent, in my opinion. They just haven't run a lot of plays. The offense has run, I believe, 20 plays. Raiders have run 35, 36. So I think it's just a time of possession discrepancy, and certain players aren't stepping up. Juwan Johnson had a really brutal drop earlier in this game. So I think so far I've actually been pretty pleased with the offense. I know 10 points isn't a lot, but they haven't looked bad, and it's a way big improvement of what we saw the last week. Forgive says, good note. Rattler looks like he's playing at his own speed and looks extremely comfortable right now. I agree. Xavier says defense is struggling per usual, but I like what Rattler is doing with his limited offense. Jerry G says, what up, Chris? What's up, Jerry? Shane O'Mac says, Rattler showing promise. Edwards-Helaire is juice. Kendra's a bust. Defense is old and washed up. I think that's kind of like the halftime summary in a nutshell. Spark Notes version. D23 says, I love what DeMario has done for this franchise, but it's time to move on. He's a step or two late every play, missing a ton of tackles. Yeah, it's not ideal. Hav C735 says, Chris, how are you feeling about Kendre Miller? Feel bad that he got a concussion. Yeah, not ideal, right? I mean, this is a player that you want to see in these moments, one of the few young guys that has some potential for the Saints, and to once again get hurt, not great. And you got to start wondering, like, is this just not going to be, I don't want to say he's not cut out for this league because talent-wise he is, but, got to stay healthy, and he hasn't. So I am definitely concerned. Too Short says it's going to take 3 good drafts to return to contender again, probably. And even then, honestly, guys, the Saints have so many holes. You need to have 3 great off seasons, not just drafts, right? Like free agency pickups have to be good, although they're not going to be that aggressive in free agency this year. It's going to take a while, so people are going to have to sit through it. Max says we need an all lineman draft, to be honest. Maybe a wide receiver early, but all linemen, and hope 1 or 2 hit on each side. No disagree there. I mean, defensive line needs a lot of help. Wide receiver too, man. Like, look who they're throwing to right now because Olave and Shaheed been hurt. Captain Deluxe says it's going to take years of zero mistake drafting Dennis Allen, set us back. Ditka reborn. D23 says is Jason David willing to come out of retirement and take Alante's spot? I joke, but damn, this D is frustrating to watch. It is really frustrating to watch, right? Like, you look at this first half, Raiders are kind of limited from a personnel standpoint. It's Jacoby Myers, it's Brock Bowers, but that's about it. And to not have a good answer against those 2 guys is really rough. Matthew says, I know this is going to be tough for you, Chris, but if you had to pick one position group on the defensive side to live with next season, what would it be? By that, you mean like, what am I keeping? Oh, man. Oh, wow. That is so freaking tough. I'm not saying I like this, but I think if you were to re-sign Paulson Adebo and go Adebo on the outside with Kool-Aid McKinstry and Alante in the slot, I think I can live with that. I'm not saying I'd be like ecstatic about it, but I can live with it. I can't live with the D-line the way it is right now. They get embarrassed. I can't live with the linebackers the way they are right now. I don't think they're good enough. And I can't live with the safeties because I don't think there's any high upside with the Saints safety play, So I guess it would be cornerback group if you're telling me I could keep Adebo. And if not, then I'm like, fuck, this is not great because I don't know what Kool-Aid McKinstry is. And I know what Alante Taylor definitely isn't. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's just not a great situation in my opinion. I'm watching these games for individual player evaluations rather than team success / failure like some. I think Rattler looks great and Kool-Aid is having a decent game. Other than that, I mean, I think that's a good way of watching it, to be honest. I mean, the Saints aren't going to help their draft stock by winning. They're really not going to hurt it by losing. I mean, they're really not going to help it by losing at this point because there's so many bad teams. And they're really not going to hurt it by winning because, like I said, there's just really bad. The way the NFL set up this year is you got like 12 to 13 really bad teams, and then everyone else is probably either contender. And there really is no middle tier anymore. So the Saints are kind of stuck regardless. And even if they were to win today, I don't think that's going to be a huge detriment to their draft stock. I believe right now, if they were to win, I think they still would hold the number 10 pick. So I don't really get caught up in that part anyway. And to your point, I want to see, like, can Rattler play better? Can certain guys step up? Can Kool-Aid have a good second half? So those are things that I'm definitely going to watch out for. There's no doubt about it. And Jordan says, sucks that cornerback might be a priority this draft or free agency. We'll see. I think if Adebo comes back, you're probably not as, worried about it. I think Paulson is a good player. I just don't think he's a great player. Max says, I think it's not time possession that the Raiders didn't have hardly any big plays, and they kept getting just enough for the first. I mean, it's wearing you down, right? I mean, look at the numbers right now. Amir Abdul-has got 11 carries already. I personally didn't expect that. It's those methodical drives. The first drive was 16, 17 plays. So I agree. Like, there's not a lot of explosive plays, but the Raiders are getting 4 yards of play enough times and 4 yards times 3, you're going to get your 10 yards plus to get a first down. So they've been doing it slowly. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts watching this game. Bio Boys 504 says, where do we start with rebuild, head coach, draft? I mean, you got to get the head coach in. Head coach has to have the right vision, and then you got to draft well. But, I mean, the two go hand in hand. I think it's very hard to find teams in this league that have good head coaches, don't draft well, or, draft well but don't have a good head coach. I feel like that's kind of a lie. So, got to get those two things situated in the same offseason and hopefully have a year next year where I don't expect the Saints to have a good record, but at least there's games where we're watching building blocks on this team. Right now, today, we're really not watching a lot of building blocks, and it sucks to say, but that's just the truth of the matter. There's not a lot of guys on this team that you feel like have to be on the Saints roster next season. Alante is awful. I've seen enough of him. Seriously, he needs everything to go well for him to look decent. I think he just needs to play in the slot, to be honest. I don't think you play on the outside slot or safety. I don't think he's an outside cornerback. The sooner he accepts it, better for him. Shane says, I don't understand for a team that prides itself on secondary play, no physical play when playing man-to-man, too many free releases. And then also Shane adds, looks like we're pretty much locked into number 10 in the draft. Yep. That's why I'm not really worried about whether or not they win or lose this game. They'll be stuck in that spot regardless. Captain Deluxe says, we traded Lattimore. Why keep Davis and Jordan? Hill is 35, retiring, question mark. I mean, Cam Jordan, I low-key think he might retire after this year. And I'm not trying to start a rumor. I just feel like that's where we're heading. As for DeMario's lost a step. I don't think you could really rely on DeMario the way you used to. So it's definitely something the Saints are going to have to figure out whether or not he wants to come back. As for Cam, I kind of feel like this is kind of his swan song, but maybe I'm wrong. Trey says Saints are letting the Raiders get too many first downs. It's a nightmare watching this team on third down. It is. Like I said, death by 1,000,000 paper cuts, 1,000 paper cuts, whatever number we want to pick. Hobc 735 says, how do you feel about Aaron Glenn becoming next head coach? I think if they were to hire Aaron Glenn, I would not be mad about it. I think if they were to hire Aaron Glenn and I feel like they didn't bring in a lot of outside candidates to interview, then I would get frustrated because then I feel like you're doing the same thing that you did last time, right? So I think that would be the frustration. I do think Aaron Glenn's done a really good job with Detroit this year. And I think more importantly, his ability to keep that defense humming despite losing almost every single freaking starter to an injury is super impressive. And I think he's a really good leader. So I am pro Aaron Glenn. I am not pro the Saints not bringing in, 15 fucking candidates and interviewing them. If it's like, Aaron Glenn, Joe Brady, Darren Rizzi, and like one or two other guys, I mean, that sucks. I want it to be a really thorough hiring process because last time around, we all knew it was going to Dennis Allen. And this time around, it kind of feels like it's going to Aaron Glenn. So we'll see. Missing Drew Brees says, I haven't missed a single game since we signed Brees, but sadly now I don't even remember what it felt like having a competitive team. How do we get out of this? I think you got to get the right coach and you got to start drafting well. And if you get the right coach, at least you're going to start feeling better about certain things. And in terms of drafting, it's not going to be one draft that fixes it. The Saints had that one draft in 2017, and we all talk about how that changed the franchise, but you had a franchise quarterback. You had a franchise defensive player in Cam Jordan. So, like, there were some bright spots to lean on. Like, you had a rock on offense and a rock on defense, and then you added some young talent. So, got to get the right coach in and got to get better defensively. So, we'll see what happens there. But the second half's about to begin, guys, for Saints Raiders. So, we're going to see how that goes, and then we'll be back here at Boo Crew Media with our post-game live stream. So, make sure you guys come back for that. Hopefully, your Rattler finishes strong, and then we can talk about that. But we'll stay tuned for more here on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.